You open the bag, you reach in, and your hand hits air before it hits a single chip. For a second, you feel cheated, like someone took your money and gave you a balloon. But the real answer is far stranger than a corporation shorting you on purpose. That mostly empty bag isn't an accident, and it isn't greed. It's one of the most quietly engineered objects in your entire kitchen, built around a problem that has nothing to do with how many chips fit inside it. You've been taught to see that empty space as a scam, something to joke about online. But every inch of air in that bag is doing a job, and once you understand what that job actually is, you'll never look at a snack aisle the same way again. Start with the chip itself, because the chip is the whole reason the air exists. A potato chip is mostly fried starch and oil is a problem the moment it leaves the fryer. Exposed to oxygen, fat molecules slowly break down in a process called oxidation. You already know what this smells like. It's that stale, slightly waxy, this tastes off flavor in old chips, nuts, or crackers that have sat open too long. Food scientists call it rancidity, and once it starts, there's no reversing it. The fat is chemically changing, one molecule at a time, into something your taste buds reject on instinct. For most of food history, this was simply accepted. Fried snacks went stale fast, and that was that. But in the 20th century, as packaged snacks became a massive industry, the question shifted from how do we make this taste good to how do we keep it tasting good for weeks, on a truck, in a warehouse, under fluorescent lights. That question landed squarely on food scientists like Theodore Labuza, a researcher at the University of Minnesota who spent decades studying exactly how packaged food degrades over time. Labuza's work on moisture, oxygen exposure, and shelf life became foundational to how the entire snack industry thinks about packaging. His research helped establish something simple but crucial. Oxygen is the enemy, and the less of it touching your food, the longer that food survives. So here's the twist. The space in your chip bag isn't air at all, not the air you're breathing right now. Most chip bags are flushed with nitrogen gas before they're sealed. Nitrogen makes up most of the atmosphere around you already, but in this concentrated form, it does something deliberate. It displaces oxygen, it pushes the air that would attack your chips out of the bag entirely, replacing it with a gas that simply doesn't react with fat the way oxygen does. The chips aren't floating in empty space. They're floating in a tiny, sealed, oxygen-starved chamber built specifically to slow down their decay. That's reason number one for the size of the bag. But there's a second reason, and it's far more physical. Potato chips are absurdly fragile. A few pounds of pressure and they shatter into crumbs. If a bag were filled edge to edge with chips and sealed tight, the simple act of stacking boxes in a delivery truck would crush half of them before the bag ever reached a shelf. That cushion of nitrogen gas isn't just chemical protection. It's a shock absorber, the same basic principle as bubble wrap, except instead of plastic bubbles, the chips are suspended in a pocket of gas that flexes and compresses without transferring force directly onto the product inside. So the empty bag is doing two jobs at once. It's slowing down chemical decay, and it's preventing physical destruction. Take away the nitrogen, and you wouldn't get a fuller bag of chips. You'd get a bag of dust. This is where the story gets a little deeper, because the chip itself almost didn't need protecting at this scale at all. Snack food wasn't always a mass-produced, cross-country industry. In 1932, a man named Elmer Doolin bought a recipe for fried corn chips from a small vendor in San Antonio for $100 and began producing what would become Fritos out of his mother's kitchen. In those early decades, snacks were local, made nearby, sold nearby, eaten within days. The packaging didn't need to fight oxidation for weeks on end because the chip's entire life cycle, from fryer to mouth, was short. What changed wasn't the chip, it was distance. As snack brands grew from regional kitchens into national and eventually global supply chains, a bag of chips might sit in a warehouse for a month before it ever reached a truck, then sit on that truck for days, then sit on a shelf for weeks after that. The chip had to survive a journey it was never originally designed for. Nitrogen flushing and engineered slack fill weren't created to trick you. They were created to let a fragile, perishable fried snack survive a logistics system that didn't exist when the chip itself was invented. There's one more piece hiding in this story, And it's chemical, not industrial. It's the reason chips taste the way they do in the first place. When a raw potato slice hits hot oil, sugars and proteins on its surface undergo a reaction first documented in detail by French chemist Louis-Camille Maillard in the early 1900s. The Maillard reaction is the same chemistry behind the browning of toast, the crust on seared steak, and the golden color of a fried chip. It's responsible for hundreds of new flavor compounds that didn't exist in the raw potato at all. This reaction is also wildly sensitive to oxygen and moisture, which means the same nitrogen-flushed environment protecting the chip from going stale is also protecting the delicate flavor compounds that the Maillard reaction created in the fryer just moments before packaging. So that bag isn't just preserving a chip. It's preserving a specific, fleeting chemical moment, frozen in a pocket of gas for as long as the packaging can hold the line. Here's where it loops back to you, standing in your kitchen, hand deep in mostly empty plastic. What feels like a marketing trick is actually a small, invisible feat of engineering, built to solve a problem that has nothing to do with deception and everything to do with chemistry, physics, and distance. The gap between what you expected and what you got isn't a scam. It's a translation error between a chip designed to survive a continent-spanning supply chain and a brain that just wants to grab a handful and stop thinking about any of this. Maybe that's the real lesson sitting at the bottom of every chip bag. The things that feel most like a ripoff are often just systems doing exactly what they were built to do, quietly, invisibly, until someone finally asks why. So, next time your hand hits air before it hits a chip, you don't have to feel cheated. You're holding a tiny, sealed time machine built to carry a fragile, perishable, perfectly Maillard-browned moment all the way from a fryer in some distant factory, straight into your hand, almost untouched by time at all. You open the bag, your hand hits air, and for the first time, maybe that air isn't what's missing. It's what made the rest of it possible.